Signs of the Southland, Sunday, September 19th, 2021. Mr. Grant, Zoom has not told me that we have 40 minutes to record this episode, so I'm going to kick it over to you to do our intro bit for today.
All right. The intro bit being the one that you crossed out here or the one that we actually want to talk about?
I don't know. This is your oyster. This is your piece of putty to mold for the next 2 minutes.
Akshay, for all I know, every team in the NFL didn't play today. I have not watched a single second of professional football. So if you have any updates on that you'd like to share, this is a safe space. Otherwise, we safely move on.
That is weak. That is weak sauce. You kicking it back to me is just like kicking it when I'm down. I'm offended. I'll be filing a complaint with your administrator post haste.
All right, I'll let Carter know that he should expect something. Anyways, for those of you, as podcasting is a visual medium, can definitely see, I'm no longer, after the last 2 weeks of having to call in on my phone, doing that. So that's fun. Back in laptop world, working on bringing some of our classic resources back to use. But analytics, numbers, not using version control. I'm really good at all this. But in the meantime, we can talk about what actually happened outside of the world of our electronics. And I think the most logical place to start with that is, in fact, volleyball.
Yes, it is volleyball. The weird thing about this week is that one of these games wasn't on TV, and the other aired side by side with the delayed second half of the Clemson game.
You know what, though? The fact that they still sold out O'Keefe going head to head with a football game, good for them. Honestly, it's a stupid, whoever forced that to happen or made them at the same time.
To be fair, they were not going to be at the same time.
Exactly.
The football game, if there wasn't a 2-hour delay at halftime, would have finished within, or at least it would have just been a couple of minutes left in the fourth quarter by the time that volleyball got started. The problem is that it started raining in Clemson, and we can talk about that and whatever happened there.
We will be talking about that.
We will indeed. But let's recenter ourselves. Let's focus on what happened in O'Keefe. Well, I guess one of these games was at NC State, and the other one was at O'Keefe. But you get the point here. So Tech did not lose a set this weekend, or I guess this week. They went 3-0 versus Arkansas. That game was played in Raleigh. There was no TV coverage of that one for whatever reason. And then they came home to play the rivalry game, and they swept those guys as well. So all in all, very, very productive weekend. I was impressed.
I believe you said it. I know you said this to me. I can't remember if it was on the podcast or in our prep last week, but Arkansas's 8-1 was kind of a, they ain't played nobody 8-1.
Oh, I said that live. I definitely said that live.
Well,
and I'm about to go back and prove it too.
Probably remember this then. I think that very accurately proved to be true this week. Arkansas in the past has been a very solid program, much as the Athens program has been as well. But this is almost certainly the biggest test either of these two teams have faced yet. And Georgia Tech needed to take care of business, and they did that. And quite frankly, they've settled into a rhythm of how they want to play their volleyball, and I think it works for them. And that's clearly the results show that out by really only picking up one loss in non-con play, which was a ranked team, top 20, UCLA on the West Coast after a really, really late night the day before, and kind of getting some of that time change probably working into it. I think this is, obviously you want to win that last game, but it's about as smashing of a success as I think we've seen from any team in handling that non-con, maybe since we've started this podcast. Maybe you could say something about a women's tennis ITA indoor type handling the business or whatever, but I mean, they don't give out awards halfway through the season. If they did, certain other programs would have lots more in their cabinets. But in terms of expectations, I'd say mine are met.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to talk about team comp, because I know we do that here and there, at looking through the box scores here. I mean, like you were saying, they've pretty much established the way that they want to play these games, and the rotation is pretty solid. Like you're seeing Kaiser rotate in, you're seeing Moss rotate in. Morissette also has been getting some playing time. Pimentel, Bertolino are major contributors. So you're looking at if I can count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 woman rotation around that for 7 spots, right? 6 or 7 spots on the court, because I can't remember how many people are on a court at the same time. But 6. Cool. So it's a pretty healthy. Boo, don't confuse me. It's a healthy rotation, right? It's a much better rotation than something we were seeing last year. And I think it goes back to something you were saying last week. It's good to have that depth. I think it's notable again that Michaela Dowd isn't on the she didn't appear versus Arkansas. I'm looking at the other one right now. She didn't appear in the other game either. So that's still a concern per se, but they're fine. They're doing fine.
I don't know if it's as much of a concern as just a confusion. Like the team's playing fine without her. I just like that. That's something that, and this goes all the way back to, I think this might have been the year before we started doing this in podcast form. Maybe I was just writing Yellow Jacket Roundup back then. But the fall that Chris Eubanks was technically still like a student, but nobody really knew what was up. And eventually he wound up saying that he went pro. But like, that's just something you get when you're talking non-rep sports. I believe earlier this week, we saw like a graphic with like Trisha Awald on it for softball. Like, oh yeah, like, hi, welcome back. It's good to have you. Like, it was a great offensive piece, great first baseman, but like, weren't you gone? Like
didn't you graduate, tweet that you were very proud of your degree, made no like indication that you were coming back, and then got your NCAA COVID year waiver approved.
And that's non-rep sports, right? So
I'm not going to complain about it, to be fair, to be very clear.
It's not something that we can or should speculate on, because the more important thing I think to take away from all of this is that the team is still playing as well as it is. And one of my big takeaways, I went to the exhibition against South Carolina in person, as regular listeners probably remember, and just getting Bertolino up to speed, I think, has been the story of the last month, right? Like it went from freshman learning the speed of the college game and stuff like that to very, very effective freshman get at outside hitter. So,
and she's, in a lot of these games, she's been in that top 3 of production. All right. If you're looking at that points category, the box score, in the Arkansas game, she's the 3rd highest. In the other game, she is the 3rd highest again. So, you're looking at a core that can now hurt you from different parts of the court. Yep. And that's super, super important. There was one other thing that I wanted to make a note of. Right. This team's problem, if you can poke a hole in it, I think it's early in games. It's early in sets. In these 2 games specifically, or in these 2 matches specifically, Arkansas took them to tiebreakers in set number 1. And the other team only went down by 3 in the first set, but the other 2 sets in both cases were massive victories, just like complete curb stoppings. So if they can clean up some of the early game jitters, I think you're looking at a very, very powerful, very, very top level contender here. And they're already there for the most part, right? But
and I think that, like, in terms of the sports landscape and stuff like that, is usually you see, and you're talking about being a top level contender, you see teams where, or cases where, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams even are getting at least a first place vote. Right now, the consensus in nationally in college volleyball is it's Texas. There's a couple believers in Wisconsin as that number 1 team. And then everything else is, I mean, I'm not going to say the door is wide open, but if you look at the conference picture, obviously it's a little crowded with 2 top 5 teams, but I mean, not that it's anyone's ball game, but essentially outside that number 1 spot, like Tech can be in the mix with almost any of these teams. You'd have to think, especially after, showing good mettle in this pre-conference slate, though, again, to take another left turn, looking back at the polls, our neighborhood right now, Tech at 18, UCLA at 19, Penn State at 20. The consensus is that the teams we've seen are about our level. Mm-hmm. So I don't think we know a lot more until we're hitting that Pittsburgh-Louisville game. But I do think we can play with the top of the conference. Like, that's pretty clear. And
you're looking at that Louisville home match in about a week and a half here, right?
Yep.
Oh, 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Math is hard. That Louisville match is in 2 weeks, and then the Pitt one is a week after that. But that one's away. So it's coming. The ACC slate starts this weekend, right? Or I guess next weekend at the time that we're recording this. So
yeah,
you are now, getting into the meat of this schedule. Getting in the meat of this schedule where it really, really matters, where execution becomes paramount, more paramount than it was before, insofar as there is no conference tournament for the ACC. So
yep.
This is where you really build that tournament resume. And I think the UCLA, the Penn State, the Long Beach State, and even Arkansas, those wins are going to help the RPI to a certain extent, but picking up, really doing well in this slate is going to really strengthen that tournament bid.
Yeah. It's very interesting to take a look at the conference standings before the conference season actually starts, because I think we've learned this in the past with our scheduling. And I kind of learned it the hard way. I think the first year that I was like, oh, I'm going to do a conference slate prediction now that the non-con is done. And we talked about Arkansas, hey, maybe that 8-1 might be a little deceiving. Like, you look at the table right now, North Carolina is sitting at 11-0.
All right, now you're making me look up their schedule. So
no, I have it up.
Oh, you teed yourself up. Damn it.
They do have a win against Michigan. Always good to go into a Big Ten teams building and get a win. That's a receiving votes team. But other than that, SF Austin, Pacific, SMU, Colorado State, Wofford, East Carolina. Okay, Michigan State. Oh, Michigan State was canceled. Okay, that makes more sense. They played Duke at Michigan. That's a little weird. Alon, Charlotte, Davidson. Like, we won't be able to tell if this UNC team is a legit 11-0 or a not legit 11-0. I think for at least a couple of games here. They get Pitt and Virginia right off the bat. Virginia's not historically all that great, but I mean, if you're circling a couple games on the calendar to look at, North Carolina, Pitt this week. You have Louisville. They're, widely seen as a very legitimate team by the coaches, which I respect that opinion. And, basically have waxed everyone on their schedule, whether that's wait. On the 18th, they played Nebraska and swept them.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. Louisville.
Oh my, that was yesterday. I feel less bad now, but
yeah, I saw that result at some point yesterday, and I was flummoxed, I will say. Yeah, that's a terrifying result. You also, but it remains to be seen whether that's a sustainable result, right? I think.
Yeah, but it was Nebraska on the road. That means they did that in front of 7,000 fans, Akshay.
This is very true. I also have not seen a box score from that game, so we don't know whether it was a demolition or all 3 sets were close.
That is true. We did not actually look up the box score. See, but I think this proves the point of like Louisville's undefeated non-con run looks very different than UNC's, right?
Which looks very different than ours. Like you can,
Yeah.
it's all an enigma. It's all shadows on caves, if you will.
Ah, wow. You're very worldly, sir.
Philosophical even.
Oh yeah.
Let's talk about what the first weekend of the slate looks like here. They'll take on Wake Forest. Georgia Tech volleyball will take on Wake Forest in Winston-Salem at 7 on Friday the 24th. That is on ACC Network Extra. And then Sunday they'll head up to Blacksburg to face off with VT at 1 p.m. That is also on ACC Network Extra. I don't have any preliminary thoughts about these two games. I think these are beyond the fact that I think these two teams are teams that Tech should handle, right? And these are games that you expect to win. So I think
you need to wax Virginia Tech. Like, I'm sorry, that's where their program's at and where ours is at. The time where it has been us and them kind of on that even field that we saw 2 years ago, kind of down the slate. I think that was 2 years ago. No. It's time to beat Virginia Tech. And we waxed Wake Forest last year twice on the road in their building. Like, sorry, I hate to set the bar high, but they need to win those two games. I do have one other game that I want to put on people's radars in terms of conference early games that don't involve us. Looking at the top 6 teams, we talked North Carolina, Louisville, Pitt, Syracuse, Georgia Tech, Miami. Miami and Louisville, Miami has 2 losses, by the way. Miami and Louisville are another opening day 9:24 game. That's going to be a big one too. So of those top 6 teams, 4 of them are squaring up in not just week 1, but game 1 on Friday night. So I think we'll learn a lot about the ACC coming up. You won't be able to say quite the same about Syracuse. They have Boston College, Duke, Wake Forest, Virginia Tech out of the gate. Look for October 8th and 10th when they get Notre Dame and Louisville to kind of learn more about them. But, I think we'll be able to sit here in a week and be able to have a little bit more definitive conclusions about, what this season looks like. And I'm very interested to see what the pollsters say about Louisville after that win yesterday.
I just want volleyball analytics. I want I want SP plus for volleyball. That's all I want now.
Yep. Same. That would be wonderful.
Need a master poll for all of this stuff. Let's move on. Women's tennis was in some action this weekend, or really this past week. I don't know. They've been in action for most of the week up in Furman at the Debbie Southern Furman Fall Classic. Say that 5 times fast. Neither can I. 5 singles titles. 4 Yellow Jackets finished the tournament undefeated in singles and doubles. Both of those quotes are from RamlinRec.com. What is the takeaway here? What did you think?
I do like that Mahak Jain took a nice singles matchup against Duke. You always love to see that. Kate Sharabura took 2 of 3 sets against a UNC player, Lindsay Zink. Those are schools you like to see us beating, because that does not happen a lot. My other takeaway off the top was, I think the script jackets look is new, like the baseball style script jackets, and or not script, but you know what I mean. I think that's a nice Adidas upgrade.
It may also have just been in the warm-up shirts, and they never wore it as a uniform.
Yeah, that's fair. Well,
I mean, either way, most realistic answer is that it was always there and they just never wore it.
That is also fair. It's all over the place, but did get 2 doubles wins against Duke. Let's see. Trying to think about other stuff. Got a singles win against Wake Forest. It's very solid to see Tech kind of, in the mix with some of these conference heavyweights, good programs. I mean, you might look at it and be like, oh, Furman. But when you look at the teams that were actually there, MSU, Duke, UNC, Tennessee, USC, Wake, like those are, it's basically all Power Five programs, and we see these teams a lot. So I'd say it's strong. And I guess my other takeaway would be, the fall season's a little bit, not that it's nothing, but it is a little bit hard to tell because it's not match play, right? We don't know what that's going to look like when that translates to courts 1-6, courts 1-3, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's where, especially when you're thinking about setting the bar based on some of these results, it's where are some of these pieces going to fall when UNC or Duke or Wake Forest put together their rotations, right? It's interesting for sure, and I think it's a sign of good progress. But I think, like a lot of things we're going to be talking about today, or already have talked about today, it's what is sustainable, right? What is reproducible? And I think that while these results are really good, the bulk of tennis's season is in the spring, so we just kind of got to wait and see.
Yeah, that's about all I got on it.
Okay, moving right along. Let's talk about men's golf. It's preview day for men's golf. It is preview day. They played a tournament last week that we forgot to cover, but clearly you were thinking ahead when you put it or on the shot sheet today because of the preview. So do you want to talk about that first? Do you want to do the preview first? How do you want to do this?
Well, first, I would like to say, sorry, golf. We didn't forget about you. We just started these late.
We also skipped 1 week. We skipped another week. We skipped 2 weeks somewhere in there.
Yeah. Well, anyways, we were trying to circle back to you, and now we can. But I think it really gives us a nice chance to, instead of, they won Maui Gym and then moving on, we get to kind of break that down a little bit, because I think that team, from where they came in January to where they are now, like this team mops the floor with the one we saw in January, and it's largely off of development and consistency and improvements from the same similar core of players. But the crazy thing is, like, almost all of these players were either none, bench, or not even a glimmer in a recruiting eye when Ogletree, Schneiderjans, Strafacci, when that was the team that carried Tech deep into the NC2As 2 years ago. So the fact that they are now a top 10 team, that they were 8 in the last poll after winning a very competitive Maui Gym in intercollegiate, which was also a very impressive result. Like, the golf they played for what the team has done in the past was impressive, but also the fact that they were doing it against those specific teams right in Scottsdale, which is where they're going to be playing NC2As. If there was ever a statement opener, I mean, obviously volleyball kind of giving us a run for the money, winning against the top 12 team against Penn State early in the year. But in terms of an opening statement, you knock off Clemson, the defending ACC champ, you lead wire to wire, and you throw down the best 54-hole score in team history. These boys are ready
strokes.
To
play. By 12 strokes.
That's
clear.
Like 1 hole of golf for me sometimes,
Yeah, that's ridiculous. Also, that record has stood for 16 years.
Oh, yeah. And it's not like we've had slouch teams in the meantimes either.
And the RegLandRec.com notes, in the end, Tech needed every shot to outlast a Clemson Tiger team that also set a program scoring mark at 797, 43 under par by 14 strokes.
Something about this. There had to have been some monster wins or something in the conditions that were just playing excellent. Maybe that they're just blowing the way you want, or familiarity or something. But if they were all playing this good, then the ACC is about to be a real barn burner this spring.
I think Lamprecht is kind of the MVP of this one, right?
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely. Considering that he finished as the runner-up, I also didn't know that he was from South Africa. That is new. But in terms of his finish, he was the runner-up for the tournament, which is a career high finish. And then he also outshot Tech's 54-hole scoring record by two strokes. So pretty impressive work here.
I literally cannot say enough like positive stuff about that, and especially again, longtime listeners, Akshay and I didn't necessarily grow up with all these sports. We've learned them somewhat on the fly over the years. Like for the longest time, I kind of just saw golf as like, I don't understand it. I don't get the intricacies. But now that I've started playing like that, every time they do one of these new record type things, I go, wow, that is
something I can't do.
Impressive, far beyond my athletic capabilities. It's great to see. And I think when times were, I guess, like most dismal for the Georgia Tech athletics, top to bottom, post Gator Bowl, post NIT, when it was just kind of the wilderness 2017-ish year, 2018 too, I guess, but the women's tennis was good then. Anyways, this men's golf team was really like that light, and it was very sad to like be like, oh, we lost all these great players and turn around, but now they're a top 10 team again. You can't keep Bruce Hepler's boys down for long.
Mm-hmm. Before we move on to the actual team preview, I want to ask you a question. And and if you have the Ramblin' Wreck article pulled up, close it first.
Okay, it's closed.
What team hosted this event in Scottsdale, Arizona?
I have no idea why, but it was Georgia State.
God, why did you look it up? This ruins my joke.
It makes perfect sense. They're just everywhere. Go Panther. I guess. I don't know. I can't even bring myself to say that.
So weird. But yes, I think you mentioned also, Ramblin' Wreck notes that the golf course that they played this tournament at, the Mirabel Golf Club, is in the same vicinity as Greyhawk Golf Club, which is where the NCAA championship will be this year, next year, and last year. So it gets a nice 3-year rotation there. Another good thing to keep in mind here, 4 of these teams, 4 of the 16 teams in this field were in the NCAA championship tournament. 8 were in regional play. And when I say NCAA championship, that is the championship round, according to this. 8 were in regional play, and then 4 are currently ranked in the preseason top 25. So it's no slouch of a tournament.
No, and Maui Gym's just a place we've seen a lot of consistent appearances at, and it's good that they're able to go back and make their claim known, and it just adds another notch in the long and storied quarter century of Bruce Hepler doing and winning things. Like that is his MO. And hey, it's way too soon to be like, maybe this is the year they do it, but I hope for his sake he gets a ring one of these days, and our sake too, but mostly his.
66th career victory at Tech for Hepler in 26 plus seasons. Second win for Tech in 4 appearances at Maui Gym. Pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
So now that we've talked about them for 10 minutes, should we preview them?
Yes. That's what I was trying to segue to, but I did it poorly. Every podcast is someone's first. Tell me about the basics of how to play golf.
It's little white balls that you're chasing around a big open field with a metal stick. It's very hard. That's my biggest takeaway from the pandemic. Golf and tennis are hard. There you go. How's that?
Wow, incredible analysis.
Yeah.
I think golf is kind of one of those things you kind of just know it when you see it in terms of what is good golf, right?
Not anything I've ever done.
Right, but like when you're watching this is also coming from someone who averages what, like 1.25 golf tournaments watched per year. So like the Masters and like whatever Georgia Tech golf tournament, like major golf tournament, and then also the Olympic tournament. Um, like you typically know really good golf when you see it. I'm not going to say that I would know it when I see it, but I'm going to say that in general, people would know it when they see it. And obviously there's like certain weird traditions about golf that certain individuals are experiencing, especially with long drives of some sort. We don't need to go into that bit of the controversy, but it's an interesting sport. It's half mind game and half physical competition. And at certain points, especially certain competitions, it's very, very compelling. It's a very, very compelling TV product if you know what you're looking for.
It's also like a game of fractions of inches and tenths of degrees, and like the wind and the meteorology. It's a very nerd sport. If you really want to break it down, it makes sense that Tech would be good at golf. There's a lot of like obviously it's a sport at heart, but there's so much like technical things. Your head is a quarter of an inch higher than it should be. Up now that ball's in the trees. Up it's windy, and instead of hitting a 200 drive, you're hitting 250 or stuff like that. Like,
so you're telling me that I can't just hit monster drives on every approach and expect to win tournaments?
No, Brooksy, you can't. Sorry.
Womp womp. Let's move on from the memes and talk a little bit about where Tech plays its golf, because obviously Georgia Tech as a campus is not particularly large or suitable enough for a golf course.
I personally love just teeing up on the Kolk rooftop garden and shanking them towards Van Leer, but that's just me,
I feel like
kidding. I'm kidding. If anyone's ever done that, I promise it was not me.
I know you're kidding, and I know you haven't done it, but someone has definitely done it. Also, it just it's like a movie set or like a movie character thing to do, I feel like.
Oh yeah. For sure.
Like a end of Ferris Bueller's Day Off, the Georgia Tech version thing to do. I'm not endorsing it. I'm just saying it would be very funny. Anyway, so Tech does practice rounds at Noonan Golf Facility. That is a brand new-ish facility at Atlantic Station. I think it was completed in 2017. I would have to check. It's right around where the old softball facility used to be back before Newborn was a thing. But their actual home course, if I remember correctly, is East Lake Golf Course on the east side of Atlanta. We could talk about the history of East Lake, but it's a lot of weird Atlanta history, and it's not my podcast to tell that story.
Yeah, I I think that could fill books at that point, but
it has.
In terms of Noonan, it's like right over there. Like we could go check it out. I could probably walk there before we finish this preview, but we're not going to do that.
Aren't you backed up to it? Isn't your current apartment building backed up to it, basically?
Yeah, it's on the other side of the hallway, though.
Okay, well, podcasting, visual medium, and also physical, tangible medium here.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty to talk about, I guess. Like it's a three-hole course. There's not much over there, but they're mainly, it's the tough part about playing golf when you are in a school in Midtown. It's the tough part about, running cross country too, frankly. There's no, all right, it's Clemson and next door is our golf course, or it's Auburn and next door is our airport, or it's Purdue and we have space for a particle accelerator, right? Like these are the realities of Midtown. But talking about the actual like competition aspect, they play a couple like handful, 5-ish tournaments every year or every semester. Ends with the championship. That is ACCs. All the teams of the conference are invited. They all show up. Combination of stroke play and match play. Match play for the top 4 teams. We'll talk about what that looked like last year in a bit, but Tech did just barely miss that last year after having won the last, I believe, 3 that had been contested. Anyways, then you move on to NC2As. There's a bunch of regionals. The top 5 teams plus top individual from each region move to the NCAAs. That's another combo of stroke and match play. Tech also made the NCAA championship last year. If you are a golf fan and you want to go out to Greyhawk in the spring, I believe there are at least one set of Georgia Tech alumni that were posted about as living on the course. So, that's cool for them. Again, they'll get to see more live Tech golf. In terms of us people going to actually see them or watch or listen, kind of hit or miss. Usually we wind up being lucky and getting 1 or 2 tournaments in a given year on the Golf Channel. NC2As usually are distributed on TV or at least on some sort of delay.
It's either like NBC, like it was on Golf Channel last year, or some sort of combination of NBCSN. The US Amateur is usually on TV, but that's not an NCAA structure. That's a individual usual golf structure deal. But Tech has a storied history of winning that, so that's why I figured I'd mention it. Golf is like, I think the interesting thing about golf is that it's like, especially with its championship structure, is that it's like tennis. It's kind of like swimming in that you get evaluated both at the individual level. You're competing both at the individual level and at the team level. And so it gives you multiple opportunities to prove yourself as a competitor.
Yep. Let's see. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I mean, we could pivot to more history. We have Bobby Jones. He's like the father of US amateur golf. That's pretty cool. Has a couple amateur cup titles, designed Augusta National. And again, there are more experienced and qualified individuals to wax poetic on that man than the two of us. But yeah, he's a legend of the game. When I went to the Atlanta History Center a couple months ago, there was a whole feature on him. So if you're interested in going to the cyclorama, check that out as well while you're up there. I would confidently argue, I think successfully, that this is Tech's historically most competent, or at least recent history, most competent program. Several second place NCAA finishes, no first places. Obviously, football has 4 national titles, yada, yada, yada. But Tech's 5 titles are, or not titles, second place finishes are no laughing matter as well. Obviously, they got the slightly smaller trophy, but all of those have come in the Hepler era, plus having, Bobby Jones go for the US Amateur, US Open, British Open, and I think British Amateur was the 4th for the original, not Triple Crown, Grand Slam. Yeah, Golf Grand Slam. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to be as good as they are and not win a title. They have 17 ACC championships to their name. That's tied with Wake Forest all time. Wake Forest has also been in the conference 30 years longer. So yeah, that's what we got. Like they're set up pretty well. We talked about how they kind of reloaded and made a bunch of really large steps for being a team that I don't think was even ranked in January, to where they're at right now in the top 10. Obviously, there's going to be bumps along the way. You can't play, 12 stroke demolition of your records every week, but
hey,
now they are back in the way that Penn State is back. It's still too early for them to be like back, but like Penn State football. Sorry for those that didn't watch the Auburn Penn State game last night and have many overreactions. But it's like it's early, but they could be pretty good, and boys can set their eyes on the ACC title at this point. Like I think that's a reasonable goal.
And I think one of the most important parts of that whole spiel is that it's a deep roster, right? And I think that's exemplified by what you said very early on when you started this segment, right? None of these guys, either these guys were not on the roster, they were freshmen, or or they were lower in the rotation when Snydergens and Strafacci and Ogletree were on the roster and helping Tech compete, right? So you still have a top line, first on the team sheet kind of contributor in Lamprecht. And that's the way that he's been competing over the summer and also through this first tournament. But you also have the depth there. You have some quality depth lower on the sheet that is going to help you compete through these tournaments.
Yeah. So, and that's a really interesting thing. And also, Coach Bruce Hepler, if you guys don't know, has a semi-regular a la the Toddcast podcast with Andy Demetra. I think it's Andy Demetra on the Georgia Tech, podcast stream.
Learfield IMG feed. Sorry.
I thought we changed from Learfield. Not important. Side note, if they could do that for more coaches, that would be awesome. I love listening to Hepler talk. He's not somebody we get to hear from a lot, but whether that's Collier or Morales or I guess Danny Holiday talk that he has more press availability, but you know what I mean? Like,
gotta bring on guests, Jake. We got to bring on guests. Finish your point.
Anyways, he made a fantastic point in, maybe some of these guys weren't like starting at the same time as Ogletree or Snydergens or Strafacci, but they were competing against these dudes every week to try and get spots at tournaments. And golf's weird, right? So it's not like it's, and we can talk about this when we get to football. It's not where you bring a lot of your roster. Our roster looked a lot smaller than Clemson's yesterday, by the way.
Getting there.
Again, different thing. But like golf scored weird. You're up against really yourself and your mind you bring 5 people, 4 can score, one's in you can have an individual, like that's weird, not necessarily team dynamic. And then for the guys who aren't on that roster or aren't that individual, you're just sitting at home. Like obviously they're practicing and going to class and stuff like that. But like the team dynamic in golf is just absolutely fascinating to me. Because like, again, you don't want to be that guy that's not, going out to Scottsdale and tearing it up or getting to bring your surfboard home with you. Like that sucks. But no, like Connor Howe, Bartley Forrester, like they were out there trying to play with some of the best amateurs that the United States have seen in the last 5 years. Like that is straight up.
Mm-hmm. It's just the roster construction element of golf just completely screws with me because it just does not make sense to my brain sometimes. And I think the overall point about that competition aspect is super, super relevant. Well, relevant's not the word, but it's super valuable, right? It's like, this is going to be a stretch and you're not going to get this reference, but you're going to have to bear with me. The value of the U.S. men's national team having the backup goalkeeper at Manchester City right now. It's not that he's getting game minutes per se, but he's in practice with a Champions League runner-up squad, right? He's getting that level of competition. He's competing with players that are better than him. For that starting role or to stay in that backup role and competing for minutes. So there's a lot of value, even if you're in the mix there, but even if you're not going to tournaments every weekend, but obviously, like you said, it stinks if you're not on the team sheet at the weekend. So,
yeah. I mean, in terms of, we've said a lot of names already, Lamprecht, Forrester, Howe, Luka Karalik, solid start to his time at Tech. Ross Steelman, Mizzou transfer, comes in with, good existing college golf experience. And then I believe Reuter and Kramer also went to Scottsdale. So might want to keep an eye on Ben Reuter and Aiden Kramer as well. In terms of that, I know Andy Mao's been on the team for a couple of years. Trying to think about anything else, but really it's that Lamprecht, Forrester, Howe, Karalik, Steelman. I think those are going to be names you're going to be hearing a lot this year. So keep an eye out on that. Wrapping it up, we talked about the Maui gym. They'll play three or four more left this fall, and then roll on to the spring. ACCs will happen in April, and then NCAAs after that. Yeah, tech's good. But this is like the one sport we can be like, hey, we're at the top of the pile in terms of ACC dominance. So that's good. And then we just gotta step on the gas and stay in front of Clemson, right?
Just to kind of knock out the rest of the schedule here, the next tournament is hosted by Northwestern, and you're never going to guess where it is.
Glencoe?
Why are you looking at the page?
I'm not looking at the page. That's a reasonable place for Northwestern to host a golf tournament. I'm from Chicago, bro.
He was definitely looking at the page. It is at Lakeshore Country Club in Glencoe, Illinois. That's actually this next week. The 27th and the 28th. That's a Monday and a Tuesday. That's interesting. Then there'll be these tournaments are so just in the most bougie places. October 4th and October 5th, they're at Maidstone Golf Club in East Hampton, New York, which is wild to think about. And then it looks like at the end of October, they'll play a 3-day tournament at the Golf Club of Georgia in Alpharetta.
Yeah, that's usually their home tournament.
Yeah, and then that is the end of the fall slate, and then they start the spring slate in Hawaii. So if you wanna follow Georgia Tech golf around, you might get some very interesting vacation time out of it. It also might cost you a lot of money.
Yeah,
it will definitely cost you a lot of money.
Yeah. Also, in terms of courses, I don't know anything about this Hamptons Intercollegiate, but Lakeshore Country Club in Glencoe is a PGA stop type place. That's a good place to see a tournament. Golf Club of Georgia has always been kind to Tech. They played there a couple times. I think the Amer Ari was on a different island last year, so I think it's a different course. Camp Creek, we've played there a couple of years, should be interesting. Southern Highlands, same there.
They get to go to some interesting places. Like
the Goodwin was on Golf Channel last year, so maybe we'll get to see him on TV.
That one's a Stanford hosted. That's a Stanford hosted golf tournament there on campus, which whatever. Calusa Cup we've already talked about, or we've talked about before on this program. But after that, it is ACC Championship and NCAA tournament time. That ACC Championship is at Shark's Tooth Golf Club in Panama City.
PCB, that fits in real well with Glencoe, Alpharetta, the Hamptons, Hawaii. PCB, bro.
Podcasting is a visual medium, so you can't see me roll. You can't see my eyes roll all the way back into my skull at the mention of that. Speaking of other calls that made my eyes roll back into my skull, do you want to talk about Georgia Tech versus Clemson?
Yes, I would love to talk about this game because contrary to some opinions out there, I actually went, as did a couple other people on our staff, and we had a wonderful time despite the loss. I don't know, man. Like, if you would have told me before the game, hey, you're going to lose by 1 score, I'd probably have been like, awesome, I'll take it. And I'll still take it. But man, it was close. That's tough.
Yeah, I have it in the shot sheet here that the high level narrative for this game, I think from the Georgia Tech perspective, is at least it wasn't losing by 66, I think is part of it. I think this was a better performance than expected. And really, if you look at the underlying numbers, I have those pulled up on another monitor here, and we'll go through those a bit later. If you look at the underlying monitors, it was a very even game, which is ridiculous to think or talk about, considering the talent gap that you're talking about. I mean, when you're talking about Clemson, you're talking about team, in terms of recruiting, in terms of recent success, team 1B, right, in the nation, relative to Alabama. And so this should, by all accounts, have been a pasting. I mean, that's what the spread said, right? It was 28 points. 28 and a half points. I think an over under of 52. I think Vegas didn't give Tech a shot. Most common sense did not really give Tech a shot in this game. And I think that, I think credit where credit is due. Like, the Tech, whether it was the weather, whether it was Clemson tripping over themselves, Tech turned the game into a dogfight and was able to at least keep it close. Right.
Yeah. I will say you're going to probably hear some discourse, maybe from Clemson fans.
You will absolutely hear some discourse about this game.
But you're going to hear, oh, it was so wet. The wet, blah, 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 rain. All right. We went up to Clemson in 2017. That was wet. That was a rainstorm. Sure, there was rain yesterday, a little bit, more like spitting. Like I sat there the whole time. I didn't have an umbrella and got I got more wet in the cool off tent thing. You know what I'm saying? Like it may have been like precipitating, but it wasn't I forget which UNC game a couple years ago where it was just like an absolute monsoon or this Tech one. Heck, even I guess I wasn't at the FSU game last year, so I'm not gonna judge that. But just in terms of all of the weird subplots that you could unpack from this game, being the lightning delay that was lightning was 13 miles away instead of 8. I don't that one of WSB's meteorologists is a Tech grad and was posting about that with, as Tech's driving down the field to
gamesmanship
to
CONCACAF.
Maybe tie the game. Also, who may have already previously had tied the game, if not for a holding call, which, oh my goodness, the Clemson fans around me thought the refs were jobbing them. At the same time, all of us thought the refs were jobbing us. So really nobody left that game.
That means it's an evenly called game. That cancels out.
Maybe they were just terrible, or maybe they were really good, and all of us just don't know jack about football. Which that could be true too. But I think that's less likely. Let's see. Yeah, there was more bats in the upper deck of that stadium than a Louisville Slugger factory.
Very nice. I got to give you credit for that one.
How long
did you think about that one?
Oh, probably my whole drive to church this morning was workshopping how to work that in. But
again, honestly, podcasting, visual medium, my eyes rolling into the back of my skull.
I'm trying to think. There's the always fun drama of does Clemson mic their band that exists on some subsection of the Twitter feed that comes across. I don't know, there's, like I said, if you'd have told me before the game it was a one-score game and we played them close, I've been like, wow. But I don't think you can really reasonably draw a ton of expectations until you go out and prove it next week against UNC. So that way there's 2 games. It's a trend, get a win. A lot of this is, all right, it's a first step. Great. Now let's take another step. It was progress. It was progress, but we need to see the 2 steps forward and not the 1 step back direction. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think I have this somewhere in the conclusion of my writing on the shot sheet is that there are really 2 schools of thought on this game. There's, especially when it came to the late game management, especially with 7 to 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Number 1 is, why didn't you go for the win? This is ridiculous. You need to be going for the dagger. You need to be playing to win, not to lose. Yada yada yada. Don't kick a field goal from 22 yards out. Yada yada yada. Just grind them into dust. There's also the school of thought that is just very happy to be in that situation where Tech only lost by 6 points. The final score, which I have not said yet, was Clemson 14, Tech 8. Also, they did not score an offensive touchdown or a touchdown in general, but we'll get there. There's those 2 schools of thought, right? I think a lot of people on the internet, and myself included, were in that first box, right? Especially, and I think you were kind of implying this underlying, especially when you can sort of see the light at the end of that tunnel and it's within reach, right? You want to make movements to go for it, to really grab the game by the horns, or by the tail in this case, right? Here's a good pun. But I think there's a value to saying, and I think that it's hard to say that this is the quote unquote right take, but I think there's an even keeled take here in that what happened, the way that the game was managed, not to lose, not to get embarrassed, is fine. That take, the idea of that at the end of the day, I may not like it, and I don't. I will be clear. I didn't like the play calling at the end of the game. I didn't like the game management at the end of the game. But I think there is some value. There's some value to being even keeled about that. It's hard. It's a hard pill to swallow.
Well, I agree. Not getting embarrassed on national TV is awesome.
Not getting embarrassed on national TV again.
Yes,
to be clear,
again, for the millionth time. I don't think that you can say that they were playing to not get embarrassed. I think like obviously like football guy, like there is some sense in all of them. They want to win these games and they believe they can. You go listen to Jeff Collins's press conference after the game, and you cannot tell me that that is not a man who is sad he did not just win a football game. I in particular, not just From the Rumble Seat as a site, say enough that we don't hear like emotion, genuinity from Jeff a lot. And last night, you get the some of the Jeffisms that we've come to know and love, but you also get clearly he thought he could win. And like that, I don't know. I don't think it's fair to say that they were playing to not lose. I'm sorry.
No, that's fair. And I think it's the two schools of thought, right? It's how you interpret the way that late game play calling happened. There's okay, these are logical steps. You're working your way. So that there's the playing not to lose. And then there's you're working your way down the field methodically. You're running a 7-minute drive to end up scoring a touchdown at the end of the game, leaving only a minute left on the clock for an offense that is anemic and that you can stop on defense. You can look at it from both of those lenses, and I think both of those lenses are for different audiences, right? I
just put one of the best defenses in the country on the goal line and said, "Stop us." Granted, honesty time. I didn't get to see the end of that live because of. It was a long day and we had to get not necessarily back to Atlanta. That's going to make me sound like a bad fan, but I promise I wanted to be there, but I wasn't. And I went back and watched it afterwards. And even then, the fact that we were in that scenario in the first place, I don't get how you can, I get why we can complain or could say things could have been better, because obviously they could, but I don't know, that's why we have a podcast, right? That's why the sausage gets made. We can debate this until we come.
That's why we're already at 62 minutes for our recording timer here. That's not meant to rush. Let's rattle off some statistics real quick, maybe to spice up the conversation here. Jordan Yates had a really good day from a vibes perspective. I don't think the vibes showed up well in the stat sheet. No. But he had a really good day in terms of the game management aspects. He didn't make mistakes. He kept the game. He excelled when it mattered, and he made plays when it mattered. And I think that was a really impressive performance. The offensive play calling around him suited his strengths well. I saw a lot of bootleg sprint out type stuff. There was a lot of jet sweep motion, a lot of play action, a lot of motion just to set up ways to stretch out the Clemson defense and put them on edge. And I think that stuff is something we've seen in the first two games, which is really good. The offensive play calling in spots here has not really been something I can complain about. I've been pretty impressed with the way that Dave Patnode has been able to scheme his receiver, scheme his running backs into space, and I think that's all really good. Yates, just to rattle off some actual numbers here, passing EPA per play, expected points added per play, plus 0.21, but his rushing EPA per play is minus 0.2. So a bit of a wash on the stat sheet, but overall, I think he had a pretty good day, especially when you look at some of the rates here. He was his completion percentage over expected on throws of 20 air yards or more was 15%. That's really, really good. Tech was passing a lot more in this game than they usually do. Tech in seasons past, like 2019 and 2020, they were usually running on early downs, those first and second downs, at about a 60% clip. 62% clip was, I think, the number that I remember seeing. In this game, they were on first down, they passed 66% of the time. On in early downs in general, they were a dead even split, 50-50. So when you're, I think from an analytical thinking theme perspective here, a lot of the things that Tech was doing are good. They are quote unquote analytically approved, right? The nerd approved, for lack of a better term. And I think for all the crap that we have given the idea of the pro style offense, the non-option offense, a lot of the stuff that they're doing with motion, with the pass rate in this game were pro style concepts, things that NFL offensive coordinators have picked up and started integrating into their game over time. The one thing that I'll note about Yates specifically on the offensive side of the ball was, or I guess the one counterpoint I'll offer is that they didn't really let him throw deep. His air yards per attempt per Robert, who does a lot of our advanced stat stuff, was only about 8 yards. So you're looking at more of those medium length throws, those keeping up with the sticks throws, rather than really letting him air it out and go vertical. So I don't know if that's something where they just don't want him to throw deep. They want to keep him to that medium range, or they're trying to scheme into space in that medium range instead of emphasize the verticality and just emphasize the horizontal play there. So those are just some of the trends and stuff. And if we want to talk a little bit more about the shovel pass and all that stuff, we can get into it. But those are the high level offensive stats that I was pleased with, and really, like you said, there are positives to take away here. It's just, are those going to be sustainable positives?
Yeah. And I'll say this till we talk about North Carolina. But I think it's funny to watch last night's game and go, man, I haven't been this relaxed watching my quarterback play since Tobias Oliver, given that Tobias is still on the roster. But I don't know, it just seemed like, and obviously there was an intentional grounding thrown in there, and the offensive line kind of had him running a little bit, or I think 4 sacks, which isn't great. But in terms of, I guess, just momentum and staying consistent and not playing it safe, because that sounds like, oh, you could have pushed it more, but hey, that he did what Tech needed to be put in a position of success for the most part. And the direction I want to go with this was Dabo Swinney, many game, right, that about the on-field stuff. Was Dabo serious when he said that Tech's lineup looked nothing like what they had prepared for?
I don't believe him for a second, because he's a football coach that gets paid, and I was almost about to look up his salary, but he gets paid oodles of dollary dues per year to watch film and know what his opponents are doing. And I don't really think what Tech was doing wasn't on film. I think a lot of those concepts that we saw, especially in the passing game, were stuff that they showed versus Kennesaw State, stuff that they showed versus NIU, maybe the rates were different, maybe the occurrences were different. Maybe some of the motion stuff was a little bit more shifty, but it really comes down to, on the Clemson side, it just seems like something hasn't clicked for them in their early season phase. It seems like whether there might be a talent deficit, a talent deficit compared to their usual championship level, or some sort of schematic hole that they're just not able to cover with the talent that they have on hand. And it's starting to get concerning at a certain level if you're an ACC football person, considering that Clemson has been your only stake in the national conversation for a while, right?
Yeah.
I think there's two ways to see that, right? One is, parity, more parity is good for the sport, yada, yada, yada. But at the same time, it's I think there's a narrative element here of where does the ACC fall in the national conversation when Clemson is kind of scuffling here. I do not think, and we can start talking about the defense here a little bit. I do not think this was a good performance from Clemson offensively, but it's unclear. And I think the most important part here is something that you've already said. It's unclear to me whether this was Clemson's play calling and situational execution was poor, or Georgia Tech stifled one of the best offensive coordinators in the nation. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle, and Georgia Tech deserves a lot of credit for scheming up a really good game and disrupting Clemson's offensive line and offensive play calling, but also Clemson offensive coordinator Tony Elliott forgot that he had Will Shipley in his backfield for approximately 2 quarters. So it's a bit of a wash, right? I'm trying to keep it positive. I'm trying to keep it light here. But again, I think the narrative of this game, and we've said it 2 or 3 times already, is this a reproducible result? Is this a sustainable result? If there are positives, like we're saying, the defensive performance was really good. It was a 68% drive stop rate. It was DJ Uyunglele, and I think I nailed his pronunciation there, only had 126 yards and had an expected QBR of about 44, and was negative on EPA per play on the day. Is that reproducible? Is Tech's defense going to be able to do that against Sam Howell? And we'll get to talking about UNC in a bit. Is Tech's defense going to be able to do that against Sam Howell next week? That's what we need to know, right? What pieces of this performance are statistically significant or reproducible in ways that we will be able to see next week?
Yeah, I think until you're getting like a UNC team that scored 60 or 59, in a climate controlled stadium, like at home, you're home-ish. You're really taking a lot of these questions. Like we had questions with Clemson's offense after game 1, right? Like they went from not scoring an offensive touchdown, or not scoring any touchdowns actually against Georgia, to FCS doesn't tell us a lot, to
still having a lot of trouble moving the ball
against Tech
versus an opponent that they have historically moved the ball all over. Well, recent history.
Yeah.
Right. It's very weird. And I think this game says a lot more. And I think SED, Split Zone Duo, may have touched on this morning, but I think this game says a lot more about the state of Clemson in 2021 than it does about the current state of Georgia Tech.
Well, the real question is, can you now irrationally write things into the statement about the University of the boys up the road and whatnot based off of this game as well? Because obviously, if this Tech team, if that's why college football is bizarre and confusing in many ways, because there's only 12 games, right? And we've only played 3. You look at this Tech team, which has both lost to NIU by 1 point and lost to Clemson by 6. NIU has gotten the brakes beat off of them by Michigan. UGA has turned around and throttled South Carolina. Like there's only so many data points we can look at in all of this. And it's like, wow, like, what are we going to be seeing in the 12th game of the year at Bobby Dodd Stadium, right? But if you start thinking about that now, like expectations, reality are just going to be completely off the chart because we don't even get to next week. And next week, we're facing a Sam Howell who, if yesterday is anything to go by, has figured out how to offense. Like, does that make UNC now a player or a contender in the ACC? Heck, Virginia Tech still hasn't lost. I don't know. I feel like we got more questions than answers from this game and this week. And even down, if you look at the swamp, Alabama, 2 points to Florida. Gosh, maybe that one's a little bit weirder than we thought. Like
it's not just the 2 points for Alabama, by the way. It's they led 21-3 at a certain point during that game, and then only won by 2 points. Florida was dead and all but buried by Alabama and Bryce Young, and then rose from the grave like the Undertaker.
Oh, that's a good metaphor. But like that's the thing. Honestly, all I want from the rest of this year is to see improvement from us and chaos everywhere else. Is that too much to ask for? Like, because it feels like Alabama having lost, basically every skill position they had, Ohio State already having lost a game and having lost a lot of their skill position players and having question marks at, hey, is which of our 5-star quarterbacks is the right option here? Like, is UGA good? They haven't really been tested other than Clemson, and Clemson is Clemson anymore. Like, are we back to Clemsoning? Like, this is going to happen is somehow we're going to have like a Wake versus Virginia Tech ACC championship game and just a smoldering pile of wreckage on the West Coast, and Oklahoma can hardly handle Nebraska. I'm going wide on this, but I guess that's my takeaway. Can we just watch volleyball? I have more expectations there.
I think to round off your conversation so we can talk about UNC in more detail real quick, I think we're setting up to have a 2007 style year, but it end in Alabama winning the whole damn thing again. Like, Alabama decides to trip somewhere along the line, but not trip hard enough that they fall, and then just turns on the Jets during the last half of the season and just runs away with it. Like, it sets up like that to me. But let's reduce scope here. Let's scope back down to just UNC. You mentioned about Sam Howell learning how to offense. UNC beats UVA by 20, 59-39. That game was in Chapel Hill. It was close at half, to the point where on my win probability chart in front of me, UVA right around halftime was actually projected to win this game with a 53% win probability. And then UNC beat the brakes off of them in the second half. It's weird. The second half was basically an infatigable boat race, and UVA just could not keep up. It was very, very, very strange. So we talked about the narrative elements for Georgia Tech here. What stands out to you as sort of what UNC wants to learn from this game?
Well, I think that's the thing. Like, everyone had all these high hopes for them at the beginning of the year. And then I guess kind of immediately after one game, which was a week 1 full lane stadium, like that is a spooky place to go in and play anytime, but getting the Hokies for a primetime game week 1, that's first game back with a full capacity in 2 years. Like, I don't think you can say that that game is the norm after looking at the last 2 weeks. And this is their chance to prove it. And quite frankly, that scares me a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
going off that, because if you only look at week 1, you look at that and see, oh, that Georgia Tech team, they played pretty well against a good defense, maybe, or offense. You get the point. Or you say, 60 points, even if we cut that down a little bit, like we, haven't been scoring at a tremendous clip. Like that's, at some point that volume just crushes you. And I think that's my at least biggest concern right here.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, here's my thing. The main thing that comes to mind for me is UNC sustainably, coming back to this central theme of sustainability in this podcast episode, is UNC the team that choked the life out of UVA in the second half here? Or is it the one that showed up at VT and sort of wilted under the pressure, especially that offensive line, right? When we're talking about, so the two things here that I want to see from the UNC side is, one, can their defense stop leaking points? Because allowing 28 first half points to UVA is a problem. But bigger than that is their EPA. They allowed about 35 expected points added total to UVA in 91 total plays. You can say, oh, some of that is in garbage time, yada, 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 whatever. But the point stands in that defense is leaking yardage. On the flip side of that, UNC's defense was, compared to UVA's defense, got or stopped UVA on 25% of its drives. UVA didn't get a single stop defensively. So pros and cons, right? Pros and cons. But they need to show defensive life. From the UNC side, they need to show life on defense. They need to show progress on defense. And they need to have a functional offensive line. Right. I think that's the thing that VT took a lot of advantage of, especially in the environment of Lane Stadium, is that offensive line was not protecting Sam Howell to the point where he was able to do well. I think in this game, the offensive line held. Sam Howell put together an 84 expected QBR. I don't have the actual QBR number in front of me. But flip side, when we're talking about the defense, Brennan Armstrong had almost 550 yards passing and almost 50 expected points added by himself. So that's what UNC needs to improve on. On the flip side for Georgia Tech, the OL play is still a concern. That's a shared concern. The thing that I want to see is, as a sustainable component here, is knowing that UNC's offensive line has had issues over the last 3 games, especially in a conference game versus VT. Can they generate the same amount of pressure that they generated on DJ Uyunglele on Sam Howell? If Jordan Dominic and Charlie Thomas can do that in this controlled environment in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, then I think that is something that we can take to the bank and say, okay, they're generating pressure better than they did last season, or there was some tweak during that Kennesaw week to where they're generating pressure a little bit better defensively. That's something that we need to track and we need to look for moving forward.
Yeah. And I think this is something that perhaps I'm now knowing, like, an IU game lost to start the year, muted a little bit of the excitement, yada, yada, yada. Honestly, if we were never going to sell 72 in the first place, I'm kind of glad it's in soccer configuration for next week, Saturday. I think that'll at least help make the space a little bit more intimate and home crowdish, because that was one of my fears coming into this game is, we say it's a controlled environment, but if it's so controlled that, you don't really get, I guess, a home game boost. And at that point, like, it's just a neutral site,
Well,
obviously analytics will say that's only worth 2.5 points to have a home crowd.
Okay, well,
yada, yada. But
we can talk about that. There's some science we can do on that one.
Yeah, exactly. But my point is, like, there needs to be somewhere that the juice is coming from. That we've seen it a lot on defense. And look, UNC just gave up 40 points too. It's not like their defense just threw up the stone wall and 73-7 them, but
okay. I'm looking at tickets for this game on the other screen, and wow, they've gotten much more expensive in the 2 days since I last looked at them. People have picked up a lot of tickets.
hopefully it's people and not just resellers. But
I will say that the Atlanta United supporters section piece, almost all of those sections are not for sale, or either sold out or not for sale. The other end zone is completely sold out from what I can see. But there are a number of seats available in the second deck, and I think a good chunk, there's like 4 or 5 listings in all of, well, 4 or 5 or 20 in some of these in the first deck as well. So I think it will be pretty full. I'm not gonna venture and say that it's gonna be like a full 42.5K. I actually don't know what the adjusted attendance is with the corners pulled out for football, but it should be around 45 if I know my stadium correctly. I'm not going to say it's a sellout, but I guess the overall good part of this is regardless of who buys the tickets, regardless of what the percentage is, we still get paid, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is like they've noted Toddcast and wherever. There's at least 5,000 student tickets out. I have heard through the grapevine that they're split student sections, so that'll be interesting. Like band on one side and like Greeks on the other. So I don't know.
That is an interesting choice that I'm not sure I agree with, but
It's logistically challenging. But hey, maybe that means UNC's playing into students both directions, which is, that's interesting. Let's see, trying to think of what else we can go from that. But in terms of tailgating, it'll be a little bit different for that.
No Gulch this year, because that's different from 2017. The Gulch is closed for construction, so your options are all the other parking decks inside the stadium, or taking the train in from campus. So
yeah,
plan accordingly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, that kind of puts a bow on it. Hopefully people are there, and hopefully you can stay loud. I don't really know how the curtains affect sound dampening or keeping it in the space or anything. Like I don't know. I have only seen that place truly sold out like one time, and I think that was Tennessee Tech. But
hey, I've seen it sold out a bunch of times. Thank you.
No, I just meant like I don't have a lot to judge.
I know I'm giving you crap. I've seen it full and loud before, and it is a very intimidating environment for other teams to play in. It just so happens that only one of the home teams that actually plays there makes it that way on a regular basis, but that's neither here nor there. I'm going to check the 10-day forecast real quick to see if maybe the roof is going to be open, and it might be. Right now, Saturday night is looking nice and cool, actually. Looks like we get a break in the heat this week. Saturday should be 77 around kickoff. Obviously,
like a gorgeous Atlanta day.
They might open the roof for that one. So
bring your friends, bring your cousins, bring your, I don't know, parents,
coworkers, parents.
Come on down to Artie Blank's really big dome.
Really big metal dome. There's many jokes to make about that. Just to rattle off some of the projections before we get, too lost into our personalities here. SB Plus has UNC by 15.7 points. That's even adjusting for home field advantage. I'm counting this as a home field game because it is in Atlanta. Ticket sales, we'll see, but it's based on literal location, it is a home game. And Vegas has UNC by, I think, 12.5, someone said. So, I mean, you're talking about effectively a 2-touchdown favorite. And again, it's another tough spot, right? The theme here is sustainability. What are sustainable themes that they can take from that Clemson game and put and take moving forward? And that's what we want to see. Any last minute thoughts before we wrap up a 90-minute episode?
Nope. Let's go home.
Both of us are home.
Whatever. Oh, I do have one other thing. Free advertisement, section 103. They're very good. Add us on Twitter, email us for questions. We're always here for it. From the rumbleseat@gmail.com. Yeah, we'll be around.
Yes, we will. We will see you all next week.